In this module, we'll talk about how, for some scholars and linguists, linguistic imperialism is a completely outdated concept. The teaching of English is often considered responsible for the spread of English and is considered a part of the imperialistic agendas of the countries which own English. It is also historically linked with the imperialistic agenda of the British Empire that they introduced English language teaching as a means of furthering their imperialism. And they introduced English language teaching because they wanted English to be imposed upon the whole world. However, it is believed that attributing the spread of English to ELT is not, there's no sufficient evidence to attribute the spread of English to English language teaching. Linguistic imperialism, if we look at the spread of English language teaching or the popularity of English language teaching in the world, and if it were a part of linguistic imperialism, it would have completely replaced mother language in the whole world, and if not in the whole world, at least in those parts of the world where the colonizers were exercising power. For example, historically, in those parts of the world where we had British colonizers, and if in today's world we think it is a part of the imperialistic designs of the British and the USA, so in those countries where these two countries have a lot of power, English should have completely been displaced, or the local languages should have completely been displaced by English. But we see that English in these countries only supplements the local languages or the indigenous languages. It has not displaced any local languages, neither in the past, not now. So English language teaching is considered a post-World War II phenomena, whereas the spread of English is very old, much older than this period, and it actually began somewhere in the 18th century, if not before that. So effect cannot post-date a cause. If ELT is held responsible for the spread of English, then it is not possible either, because the spread of English did not start after the Second World War, but it started somewhere in the 18th century. So we cannot attribute the spread of English to the conscious ELT policies which were made after the Second World War. It is because of these reasons that many scholars think that linguistic imperialism is an anachronistic concept. It is an outdated concept. Just as the days of colonization are over, this view should also be now put to rest. It is a completely outdated concept. The power asymmetry, the difference in power that we see between the formal colonial nations and the nations of the Third World, is inadequate as an explanation of the linguistic realities, only because the colonizers were more powerful, and the countries that they colonized, which are now part of the Third World, this is not sufficient evidence to, or sufficient explanation to justify linguistic imperialism, that it was the use of the language of the nation or nations which were more powerful by the nations which were less powerful. So this does not imply linguistic imperialism at all, according to some scholars. And another fact that cannot be ignored is that many of the first world countries with their own strong languages show willingness to adopt English. For example, we see a lot of people have personally met people. I have this personal experience where people who come from powerful countries and people who themselves have powerful languages show a willingness to learn and use English. For example, people from Germany, for example, people from Japan, Korea, and many other European Asian countries show a lot of willingness to learn English. So we cannot say that the weak nations are overpowered by powerful nations and therefore their language, that is English, is imposed on the weaker nations. Another fact that makes this whole concept very outdated is the fact that some of the harshest criticism on English has come from countries which have no such colonial legacy. So we have several scholars and linguists who are not from the countries which were under British colonial rule, and still they criticize English a lot. So it has got nothing to do with being powerful or powerless or being strong or weak. So there are other reasons for the popularity of English. Now, what are those reasons? We all know this very well, that access to English give learners access to a very important linguistic tool. It gives them power themselves. The knowledge of English empowers people generally. It helps individuals, and not only individuals but also large economies, to develop and compete globally. So English should be looked at now not as a part of the imperialistic policies or imperialistic designs of powerful nations, but as a powerful tool which can be used by individuals and also by economies, by whole countries, to take part in this global struggle for success, for development. So it should be looked at as a tool for empowerment rather than a policy or imperialistic agenda of powerful nations.